You can't just buy a cow and get unlimited milk on demand. Building a SaaS is a great way to spend a lot of money and have nothing to show for it. So how many players in that market are going to be qualified to buy your SaaS? Today, I just wanted to talk about a topic that I've been thinking about a fair amount lately, which is the idea of starting a SaaS when you're a consultant or when you're an agency owner or when you're doing some sort of a done-for-you service. So as a programmer, I get approached by a lot of founders that say along the lines to me something like, I'm thinking about building a SaaS, but I'm not sure where to start. Where should I start? What should I do? Well, there's a big difference between a software as a service and a consultancy or an agency. Again, the consultancy is more the done-for-you approach, and the SaaS is the do-it-yourself approach, the way that the SaaS dictates. What I find is that a lot of consultants want to kind of bundle up what they do into some sort of a product. The idea that, this is the way our agency runs. I'm going to bundle this up into a product that I can sell. I can get passive income. I can get maybe more consistent monthly recurring revenue, and I don't have to worry about cash flow so much, right? So SaaS feels like the natural fit. I've run a successful consultancy. I've run a successful firm. So obviously I should be able to run a software as a service, right? Like I'm just going to automatically be successful about that. Well, not always. Let me tell you a story. Where I'm coming at this problem from is, again, I've been an advisor to many different startups. I have been part of a number of startups myself. I've worked for different startups. I've taken equity in startups to help get them off the ground. And the story I'm going to tell you is one, I'll anonymize it just because of NDA stuff. But basically, this owner had built a business that was very close to a home cleaning business. Basically, they went in and did inspections on summer properties or winter properties. And the man was absolutely brilliant at it. It was a family business. It was him, his children, and they had hired local staff to inspect these homes while the owners were away. It was absolutely brilliant. And so he thought, well, I'm going to build a SaaS for our own business. And then he looked into the market and saw that there were other companies that were offering the same service across the United States. And so he ended up building a proof of concept. He ended up bringing in investors and built a bigger SaaS. And over time has become profitable, but not without a bunch of bumps along the way. And I've seen this similar scenario play out with other startups over the years. And usually how it comes up is a founder will send me a DM on Twitter or on LinkedIn, and they'll say, I'm thinking about hiring developers for my SaaS. Like I want to build a SaaS, and you're a developer, so you know how to find, how do I find developers? How do I find programmers? Well, let me take you through the mistakes that this founder had made and how you could perhaps avoid them. And then I'll take you through how those discovery calls, for lack of a better word, that I go through with founders go. So one of the biggest mistakes I thought that this gentleman made when he was building his SaaS was they implemented the SaaS for themselves first, which is great. If you have a business, it's booming, and you can think of maybe some better ways, some ways to gain some efficiencies by, say, maybe using a no-code approach these days, like an Airtable, to make your business more efficient, yeah, by all means, build yourself a SaaS. However, where I would caution you is to think that, the SaaS that I'm going to build is going to be relevant to the market at large. In other words, if I solve my problem, there must be a lot of people also experiencing this problem. This is where we'll get into the research bit and the ideas of total addressable market in a few minutes. The mistake that they made was, while it seemed like a good idea to build the SaaS for themselves, they started to add, before they went to market, they started to add more and more features without validating whether the market needed those features or not. They were also going after a market that was resilient, or resistant, I should say, to technology. So a lot of these smaller companies that were providing these services, they were mom and pop organizations, maybe had 1 or 2 employees at most. A lot of these operations were so small that they didn't need a software as a service offering. They didn't need what this gentleman was providing to the market. And they didn't see the need for any of the advanced features that this founder had added to this SaaS. And so it was kind of like a solution in search of a problem. You know, these features were useful for this gentleman running his home watch business, but it wasn't necessarily useful to the market at large. And this is where we got into the biggest issue, which was not knowing his actual value proposition. And this is where I find a lot of founders go off the rails. So here's where we start to get a little bit more emotional. Let's talk about your value proposition. When I say value proposition, that is a fancy way of saying, what is it that your SaaS does? What problem are you trying to solve? What is your job to be done that your SaaS is taking care of? And this is where I get into the snappy answers. Usually there's some sort of a rehearsed line that I'll get back, like, we're going to be the Uber for X, or we're going to be the Airbnb for Y. And while that sounds really cool, like you're going to be the Uber for X, no, you're not. I'm sorry. You're just not. It's a great line for inflating your ego. But what that doesn't tell me is what job your SaaS gets done. And whenever I hear that we're going to be the Uber for X, this is where I get ruthless in my questions. Because if you want to be the Uber for X, if you want to get to that scale, then you need to know every last inch of your industry. And you had better be ready to be ruthless. And I mean ruthless, because here is the unsexy truth. Uber, Airbnb, all these unicorn startups got to where they were thanks to low interest rates, which allowed them to subsidize bringing on new customers. They got tons of venture capital money, and they were able to move at the speed of light and eat up the market as fast as they can. Their biggest advantage was we had tons of venture capital bucks to spend to acquire customers as fast as we can. And this is where we get into market size. So whenever I hear this line of, we want to be the Uber for X, I go, okay, well, what's your market size? And the founder will usually answer something like, well, the market size is about $1 billion a year. But can you imagine if we captured 1% of that? That would be $10 million of revenue a year. Nonsense. This is a nonsense way to think. And you're probably thinking, oh, 1%, they're probably thinking it's too big. No. You're not going to become the Uber of X if you are aiming to capture 1% of the market. Uber did not get to where they are by aiming to get 1% of the market. If your aim is to get 1% of the market, you are thinking too small. Uber, Airbnb, Ticketmaster, Eventbrite, they did not get to where they are by trying to capture 1% of the market. They got to where they are because they are out for total market dominance. They want to capture the entire market. Make no mistake, they are out for blood. Celebrity ghostwriter Joshua Lysak talks about this. He's interviewed and written books for entrepreneurs, and I'm talking successful billionaires with a B. These people, when they decide that they want to win, they want to dominate an industry, they decide they want to win and that they want their competitors to lose. They are in 100% and do whatever it takes to capture the entire market. So make no mistake. If you are going for, I'd like 1% of the total addressable market, you're not thinking big enough. You're not ruthless enough to take the entire market. Let me take you through some markets and show you what I'm talking about. So the biggest players in a bunch of these markets take between 5 to 20% of a given market, sometimes less, sometimes more. It depends how concentrated an industry is. If we talk about the customer experience segment, so this is like help desk, customer service kinds of things. Zendesk, according to one source, captures about 20% of that industry. Freshworks with Freshdesk and their product line, they're capturing about 4%. What you'll find in every single industry is that there's a couple of companies that have the most market share. And they're the ones that'll be the most profitable. This brings us to the idea of Pareto distribution, the 80-20 rule, right? So most markets will work like this. There's a couple of behemoths. These are the big enterprises that control like 5 to 10% of that market. And then there's some superstar independent operations. They control maybe another 5 to 10%. When I talk enterprise, I'm talking about like nationwide. And then that 5 to 10% superstar independent operations, they're more like your regional players. And between these two categories, the superstars and the behemoths, that's where 80% of the money in any market is made. The remainder of the market scraps it out for the 20% of the money that is left. And you will find out that this plays out in every single industry, from hotels to events to software to cleaning to janitorial services. Any market you can name, it goes the same way. And this is where you need to start thinking about what is your total addressable market. You need to validate what your total addressable market is. The total market, let's say for, let's say the total market for your industry is $1 billion a year. So that's, you pick the cleaning industry, for instance, then it's $1 billion a year industry. Well, how many companies that are part of that industry are going to be able to afford your product, afford your service, and have a need for your SaaS? So what's the demographics of the companies that you're going to serve? Are they business to business? Are they business to consumer? What's their average company size? What's their average yearly revenue? How many clients do they have? Do you know their total addressable market? And is that market dominated by, say, a monopoly? Let's, again, going back to that idea about the 80-20 rule. In 2018, for janitorial companies, 8% of industry revenue in the United States is from the top 4 companies. Are the remaining 90% profitable enough? So according to one number that I saw, there's about 1.2 million cleaning or janitorial companies in the United States, and that industry generates close to 90 billion of revenue a year. So on average, if you divide 89.7 billion by 1.2 million, you find out that each company on average generates $74,000 worth of revenue per year. Suddenly, this total addressable market's not looking that good. Let's apply some really bad math. I love really bad math. Let's say the top 4 profitable companies make up 10% of the market. And then, so that means that we have another 1 million companies that fight over the remaining 82.5 billion. So that brings our average revenue up to 80.9K per year. That's what's available on average for the remaining number of companies. Those numbers aren't that great. So if your SaaS is costing $250 a month, that's $3,000 for the year. You're going to need $20,000 a month to break even. So you need to have 80 paying customers. You need to be able to validate, hey, are we going to be able to get 80 paying customers to pay for this piece of software? And again, there's another story that comes to mind. I was on a consulting call with a company. They were going to make a software as a service that was an ordering system for mom and pop restaurants, so that people would know when their food was ready for pickup. They could order, say, over the phone or online, and then they get a message saying, hey, our food's ready for pickup. Well, between McDonald's, Yum Brands, Starbucks, Wendy's, and Burger King, those control 40% of the restaurant market in the United States. That means the remaining, and they make the majority of the profits, by the way. The rest of the industry is scrapping it out for whatever bits are left. So again, are they going to be, how high are you going to be able to price your software as a service? Probably not that high if you want to target the rest of the market. If you want total market dominance, again, you're going to have to get those venture capital bucks. So you need to know what your total addressable market is. So yeah, it might be a $1 billion a year market, a $10 billion, $100 billion a year market, but what's the market size of the companies or people that can pay for the service or the product that you're going to be offering? So how many players in that market are going to be qualified to buy your SaaS? So this is where you need to be doing your market research. If you're going to be selling a SaaS, say, to cleaning companies, maybe their total addressable market, for the region that they're in, caps out at maybe $250,000 to $500,000 worth of revenue a year. Do they need you? Can they afford you? These are all questions you need to be asking. And now, if we continue the call at this point, it usually pivots to something, the founder saying something to me like, oh, well, we're just going to price it low and we'll achieve market penetration and then we'll increase the price later. That's what Uber did. That's what Airbnb did. That's what all these different SaaSes do, right? This is such a trap. I've seen it play out so many times. What ends up happening is this. You're so cheap that the good customers go, oh, well, what's wrong with this solution? Is this just the discount brand? And they don't sign up. Then you start attracting the needy customers, the crappy customers that are just, what they're looking for is they're looking for a scapegoat when their business goes sideways. You might attract enough customers to just keep the lights on, just barely break even. What I see time and time again is founders will never get to that stage where they raise the price. And their line is always the same. They're afraid to raise their prices because they're afraid that they're going to lose their customers. And yeah, you're going to lose your customers. You're going to lose some customers when you raise your prices. You know which customers you're not going to lose? The customers who get real value out of your software as a service. The ones that are going to churn, those are the ones that aren't getting the value. They're the ones that you don't want. They're the ones that are going to be consuming all of your time, your energy, your money on support costs. If you decide not to increase your prices and you get kind of stuck in this cycle, eventually something happens. And let's say a competitor comes in the market, they're a little bit cheaper, or there's a major upgrade that you need to fund, and we'll get to maintenance later. And it's just too much for the company. So you end up shutting down and you end up losing all your customers anyway because you had to shut your SaaS down. So now you don't have any customers. So yeah, if you raise your prices, you're going to lose customers, but you're going to lose fewer customers by raising prices than you would by having to shut your business down. And again, you're not Uber. You probably don't have venture capital money. So you need to make money. Somebody can always undercut you. If the only reason that you have somebody stay is because you are the cheapest, you're going to lose in the long run. You're going to lose with somebody who's got a bigger war chest. And that gets me to a critical point that your SaaS needs to solve. Your SaaS must become an integral part of your customer's business. This isn't nice to have. We're past that era. They need to be using your product every day, multiple times a day to solve real world problems. You need to be able to communicate this in your value proposition. Forget any of this. We're going to be the Uber of whatever. That's nonsense. What you need to be communicating is companies use us to solve a problem so that they can reap whatever benefit. X companies use us to solve a problem so that they can reap a benefit. The best cleaning companies use Clean Pro to run their cleaning business so they can book more clients and make more money. This is not a nice to have. You need to be 100% clear about your value proposition so that you can figure out your total addressable market. You need to figure out which companies, which people can actually afford what it is you're offering to the market. And again, it's something that they should be using every single day, multiple times a day. I'll give you another reason why you should never price low. Never compete on price. Here's another reason. I've had this call. I remember having this call as a founder or with a founder multiple times. He would get off of a sales call and I'd meet with him and the conversation would go like this. Oh, I just had a sales call and they absolutely loved what they saw. Really? That's awesome. All right, cool. So when are we onboarding them? Well, they mentioned that we're missing feature X, and they said that once we've got feature X, they're definitely going to buy. They're never going to buy. This is total nonsense. Every single time I have been down this road, either as a founder, as an advisor, as an employee, I have seen this, and every single time they didn't buy. The prospect did not put their credit card down because every time we would go away and implement X, they would come back to us and say, oh, well, we also need Y. And then we would go and implement Y. And then they come back and say, oh, we need Z. And by the way, we need A, B, and C. And then we'll definitely sign up. And then they never did. And then they never did sign up. X always kept getting moved to some new feature. Here's the deal. If somebody who is a professional in your industry does not see value in the product that you have built, and this is assuming that you have built a product that is the right fit for your industry. If a professional in your industry does not see the value in that product today, without an extra feature being implemented, chances are they're not going to see the value in your product when you implement feature X. There's always another feature that you could be missing. Now, the question you might ask is, oh, well, what if we aren't really missing this feature? Well, go hop on 100 sales calls. If every single sales call, everybody says you're missing feature X, fine, you might be missing feature X. But if you're paying customers, your paying customers are your number one most important metric as a founder of a software as a service. And when I talk about paying customer, I'm not talking about people on a free trial. I'm talking about people that have given you a credit card number. They have been on the free trial. They are done the free trial. They have paid for their renewal. They are using the software on a regular basis, and their payments have never bounced. If those folks turn around to you and say, you know what would be handy to have, and they give you feature X, take heed. Maybe you should implement feature X. Again, if you have a bunch of your customers that say, hey, you know what would be handy to have? Feature X. Yeah, okay, fine. There might be some wisdom there. Take note of the feedback from people who have bought your software as a service. If somebody is not paying, but they're dangling this carrot in front of you to say, you know what, you implement this feature and then we'll sign up, 99% of the time, never going to happen. I have yet to see that happen in the real world. It's not your job to convince someone who will not believe in your product to buy it. If somebody is a professional in your industry and you have a SaaS that solves problems for professionals in your industry and they don't get it, that's not on you. If your value proposition is not clear enough, you need to tweak that. But if your value proposition is clear, if your demos are clear, if you have paying customers and they're getting value from your product and somebody is coming along and saying, well, you need feature X and then we'll buy, don't listen to that. That's just a waste of time. And again, you need to be clear about what job does your SaaS get done for your customer. That's your value proposition. We are the Uber of X is not a value proposition. That might sound nice. It might inflate your ego at night, but it doesn't pay the bills. Now, most of my founder calls end here. A few get to talking about the implementation. And let's talk about implementation, the main piece that we're here to talk about. And that is your prototype and your minimum viable product. Generally, these are separate from your final product. In my experience, what I found is we get an MVP out onto market fast, and then later on, if we validated that solution, we'll go off and build an actual final product, or we'll evolve the MVP into more of a final product. Your MVP is going to help you validate that there is a need to be filled. And the way you're going to validate it is by getting people to pay for your solution. You validate your product with paying customers. Building the MVP is going to be expensive. It's going to probably mean hiring programmers if you are not a programmer yourself. Your MVP is probably going to be built in a way that it could scale up to a certain degree, but beyond a certain number of customers, it's just going to be too expensive to run. You're going to need to go to something a little bit more bespoke. Your MVP exists to prove that your idea works and that you can onboard more customers and that you can, there's a problem to be addressed here. I'm going to emphasize the word minimum viable product. It needs to solve a targeted pain in your industry. And the ultimate judge of does it solve a pain is someone or a bunch of someone's willing to pay for your service, your software as a service. And again, depending on how that MVP is built, it may or may not be so scalable. If you're using a no-code solution, it may be scalable up to a point, but it might be harder and more expensive to scale. Turning your vision into a finished product, that is the hard part. That's the expensive part. And vetting developers can be difficult. And if you're not a developer, it might seem impossible to figure out, well, who the heck do I hire to do this? I'll get into that later, but you might want to look for something called a full stack developer. That's somebody that can do the back end, can do the front end, can do all the glue pieces that bring it all together. But before you even think about hiring a developer, you need to get crystal clear about what you are building. You need to know what you're building. And by the way, things are going to change as you get paying customers. They're going to point things out to you. Like I mentioned, they're going to, point ways of how they run their business out to you that you had not thought of. And remember, paying customers, not the people doing the free trial, not the people who are, once you implement X, then I'll pay. I'm talking about paying customers, people that plonk down a credit card. You need to be clear with what needs to be in your minimum viable product. What is the least that must be implemented for someone to be successful today with your product? Now, you might be thinking, well, I'm not a programmer. You don't need to be. You don't need to be a programmer to figure out your minimum viable product. What you need is a pen and paper, because you can sketch out user interfaces on paper. You can sketch out buttons on a piece of paper. You can sketch out tables on a piece of paper. You can sketch out links on a piece of paper. What you want to do is create these low fidelity prototypes where you actually sketch out, what is this minimum viable product? What is this SaaS that we're going to build? And you can be as wild in your imagination as you want here. You're just sketching on paper. You want to imagine, draw down on paper, what does each screen look like? If I tap this button, where does it take me? And then go sketch out that screen. You can do these low fidelity prototypes just for the cost of your time. And that's going to help you clarify what your SaaS does and what it does not do, more than writing about it or trying to find the perfect developer. Once you've got those low fidelity prototypes, you can take those, show those to fellow industry members. You can show them to family members. You can show them to your friends. You can get rapid feedback and iterate on those. You can show them to your staff and say, hey, would this actually solve some of our problems? And you can iterate on those ideas fast. These low fidelity prototypes are awesome. And they give you a benchmark. You can compare what your developers build to what you've sketched out on paper, so you know, have we actually built what I envisioned? So low fidelity prototypes are a fantastic way to get your vision of what your SaaS will do clear. Figure it out on paper first. The further you get into building your SaaS, the more expensive it's going to get to fix any errors in the vision. The most expensive way to build your SaaS is to have none of that done. Don't be clear on your value proposition. Don't have any low fidelity prototypes done. Sketch out none of the user interface. The most expensive way is to hire a developer and figure that out as the developer's burning through your payroll. Now, when it comes to hiring a developer, again, look for a full stack developer. Those are professionals who know the whole, who know how to do front end, they know how to do back end, they know how to do database or, data storage. After you've figured out what's going to be in your MVP, that's when you should build. Yeah, you can start from templates and you can have your devs start from boilerplates and templates that are already written. And sure, you can build on no code to validate your idea. But you should also know at what point you're going to outgrow those solutions and maybe need to have something bespoke. And don't forget, your choice of platform could make or break your startup. So is that no-code app you're using, are they going to be around a year from now? What happens if they increase their pricing because interest rates are up? What happens if they increase their pricing on, say, how much it is to use their platform, because they've introduced a new tier? Look what happened with a bunch of small startups that were using Twitter. They now have to pay, I think it's $42,000 a month to have access to the Twitter API. Well, for a lot of small Twitter SaaSes, that was just far too much to use their API. So if you own your own platform, you're somewhat immune to this, but it carries with it other issues. Now, once you get past what's going to be in my MVP, minimum viable product, you start to get into the issue of customer service. People don't read the documentation. Just get over that right now. You're going to swear and wonder why nobody reads our documentation, nobody watches our tutorial videos, nobody reads documentation, nobody watches tutorials. And you're going to be tempted to give your contact info out to every single customer who signs up. like you have maybe as an agency owner, as a consultant. And in the beginning, this can be fine, but it does not scale. This strategy does not scale. After about 20 customers, you will spend your entire day on the phone answering support calls, because they'll not email support@company.com. They will call you, and they will rag to you about how the software, has this bug that's absolutely killing their business. It's not. They're inflating it for hyperbole, and they want you to fix it. And fair enough. But you're just going to get inundated with phone calls. So you're going to need a support system. You're going to need people running customer support. You're going to need to have service level agreements to say, here's how quick we're going to respond to issues. You're going to need to sell priority service to, say, larger accounts. You need to make clear what your hours of operation are going to be. You're going to need a support system. You're going to need somebody to run in front of that. And by the way, it's not just to save your sanity from getting 1 million support calls a day. It's going to be to save your confidence too. Because if you as a founder, if you're getting hit with nothing but feature requests and bug requests, it's going to kill your confidence. Again, I've been part of startups where the CEO and the founder were dealing with frontline customer service. They would panic. So every time there was a bug, it was like a 5-alarm fire. Pull all the devs into an emergency meeting. We need to fix this. If we don't fix this, our client is threatening to cancel. I always wanted to call the client's bluff and go, okay, your whole business is running on our SaaS. Like, go ahead and cancel. Won't break my heart. So we kept pulling devs off to fix problems, but the problem was that they never had enough time to work on their own work. And so we were so busy fixing bugs that whatever time they had left to work on the actual work they needed to get done, they just didn't have enough time. The code got rushed. There was more bugs. Bugs begat bugs, and it was a vicious cycle. So you need to separate yourself out from that customer service side. You cannot be the customer service. Not everybody is entitled to your phone number. In the beginning, when you're doing beta testing, maybe, but after about 20 or so customers, you have to remove yourself from that customer service side. And speaking of team members, this gets into the continual maintenance part. The biggest myth with any software as a service startup is that we're just going to build this software as a service, and it's going to run itself. And all we need to do is just, do some customer service, maybe a little bit of maintenance. Yeah, it's just going to run itself. I hate to burst your bubble. The easy part of building a SaaS is building it. The hard part is everything else. It is the sales. It's the continual maintenance. It's the feature requests. It's the customer service. It's responding to Google has decided to kill off yet another service. It's Apple's released a new version of iPhone OS and our app is now broken. Easy part is building. The hard part is maintaining. A big trap founders fall into is that we just build it and then we just do some continual maintenance. But again, what happens if a platform you're relying on goes away? Amazon decides to shutter a cloud service. There's a security vulnerability in a library that you're relying on. It needs to be patched. And then that patch introduces new updates that need to be installed. And those new updates break something over here. So now we're just, things just spiral out of control. Who's going to take care of that? Maybe time marches on and a new version of Chrome or Safari comes out, and now your SaaS doesn't work on their browser for some reason. This happens all the time. Not to mention, if you've got a phone app, a new version of the iPhone OS SDK comes out or the Android SDK comes out, and it breaks compatibility with your application. And if your app is too old, maybe it gets delisted from the store because it's not been kept up to date. Or it can't be installed on newer devices because of compatibility issues. Or, the iPhone has a new size now and one of the critical buttons is cut off because your dev made an assumption about layout. All of this stuff happens. If you're going to start a SaaS, you have to get rid of the words "once we're done." As a SaaS owner, the work is never done. I hate to say it, but if you think you can build a SaaS and then just milk it, it just doesn't work that way. You have to think of a SaaS as a living, breathing entity, kind of like a cow. Because think about it this way. When you buy a cow, you don't just get infinite milk forever, right? With a cow, you have to give it a place to live. You have to feed it. You have to make sure it has health care. You need to clean it. You need to clean out its barn. You need to tend to it when it's sick. You need to, give it a nice place to live. And you need to make plans to replace that cow when it's too old and can't produce milk anymore. You can't just buy a cow and get unlimited milk on demand. There is work that goes into getting the milk, and there's going to be work that goes into ensuring the cow is going to continue to produce milk. So just because you build a SaaS, it's not going to be the magical gateway to this passive income paradise that you think it is. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. The easy part with a SaaS is building it. The hard part is everything else. And if you've stuck with me this long, you're probably thinking to yourself, oh my goodness, I should never start a SaaS. And that's not what I'm saying. Don't get me wrong. That's not what I'm saying here. What I'm saying is that if you are a successful agency owner, you're a successful consultant, it doesn't mean that if you wrap up what made you successful or wrap up your best practices into a SaaS, it doesn't mean you're going to be an overnight success. A software as a service is a product. Being an agency owner or being a consultant, you're providing a service. These are two very different types of companies. The fundamentals of business are still the same. You still need to achieve product market fit, and you still need to make money. But if you're trying to do that by emulating how Uber and Airbnb grew without the funding that Uber and Airbnb had, which was millions upon millions upon millions of dollars of venture capital money, you're going to fail. You're going to spin your wheels. You're going to spend a lot of your money, and you're going to be left with nothing. I don't want to take away from the idea of having vision and ambition and affirmations and all that stuff. That's all important. You need to believe in what you're doing. But that belief needs to be matched up with the idea of we are solving a real problem for the real world in our industry. The fundamentals need to make sense if you're going to exist a year from now as a company. If you're bootstrapping your SaaS, if you're self-funding your SaaS, you need to have a path to profitability from day one. And that means that every customer you acquire has got to bring in more revenue than they cost. So for example, if you're bringing on a customer and they pay $250 a month for your service, and it costs you, say, $50 a month to have them on board in terms of the bandwidth they're using, the server power that they need, maybe the help desk stuff that they're bringing in, you make $200 a month on that customer. Don't forget to factor in how much does it cost to acquire that customer? What's your customer acquisition cost, your CAC? How much does it cost to find somebody new and have them put down their credit card and pay for your software as a service? Are you doing that through cold email? Are you doing social media ads? Are you doing search engine ads? Are you going to conferences? Are you hosting webinars? Are you doing your own virtual events? By the way, that can be a great way to do it. These are all great ways to do it, but they all cost money. And again, how much time does each customer consume in onboarding and support costs, and how long are they going to stay a customer? What is their long-term value, their LTV? You don't need to have exact answers to this. You won't have exact answers to this, but you need to have a rough idea. What I'm trying to say is that if you're going to build a SaaS, you need to build a SaaS with both eyes open. You need to be realistic about it. I don't want to stifle ambition. I'm far from it for me to be the person to say, don't be ambitious, don't try and build a SaaS. What I'm saying is a lot of times, if you're building a software as a service, you need to have your fundamentals in order, because building a SaaS is a great way to spend a lot of money and have nothing to show for it. You can spend hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars and have nothing to show for it. And I'm trying to help you avoid that pitfall. You need to be okay with the fact that building a SaaS is going to take longer and cost more than you might think. And I'll leave you with one last idea here, which is your SaaS a product, or is it a feature that somebody else could implement and wipe you off the face of the earth? And I think you're thinking the same product I am, and that was Clubhouse. Remember Clubhouse? Clubhouse was the hot new event app during the early 2020s. It was unfiltered, easy to join voice chat, and it looked like it was going to be the next big thing. It was going to be the next huge unicorn, right? Then what happened? Twitter added spaces. Facebook added audio rooms. Telegram added voice chat. LinkedIn added audio events. The list goes on and on and on and on. everybody added something like Clubhouse to their product. And the result was that Clubhouse's valuation tanked. It just went down the toilet. Why? Because they were a feature, not a product. They were a feature that was easy to copy and implement. They weren't a product in and of itself. So be honest with yourself. Are you implementing a feature or are you implementing a product? Those are two very different things. So to summarize this whole, summarize all of this, SaaSes can be great ways to wrap up your processes and systems into a systematized product that can help the top players in your industry to be successful. But it's going to cost you more time and money than you might expect. If it were me, I would not try to run a SaaS and an agency at the same time. It's going to take a lot of time and effort to do both, and one is going to take away from the other. I'd be very careful about that. If you're not going for the venture capital money, you need to find a way to be profitable from day one. Each customer you bring on should be in the black, not the red. You need to know your market inside out. You need to know what is your total addressable market. That is different from the market size. Your market might be 50 billion in revenue per year, but how many of those companies are going to be qualified to purchase your SaaS? You need to be able to delegate. So as an agency owner, you probably have a small enough client base that you can be involved with every single project to a degree. That's not the case with a SaaS. If you've got dozens, hundreds, maybe thousands of customers, there's no way that you're going to be able to be involved with all of them. There's just no way. You're going to have to delegate. You're going to have to delegate building. You're going to have to delegate customer service. You're going to have to delegate sales. You're going to have to delegate support. That delegation costs money. That's why the profitability is important. The ultimate test for any software as a service is, will somebody buy the early version of what you are selling? If your product solves a real problem and people buy it, that is the metric to track. That is the number one metric that you need to be tracking as a SaaS owner. If a lot of those someones buy into what you're doing, then you're onto something, provided that you are profitable. If someone says, I'll buy it once you implement this feature over here, they are liars. They will never buy. They just don't have the guts to tell you, I can't afford it. Remember, your profits is a better metric of success than the number of users. Because if you're unable to be profitable, if you cannot sustain your software as a service, it does not matter how many users you acquire. It doesn't matter how many features you implement, because over a long enough time period, there will be somebody who can come in and undercut you, who can siphon away enough customers of yours that over time, you have no choice but to shut down your company. If you're not profitable, you'll go broke, your SaaS will shut down, and all your customers will churn and go to your competitors over a long enough time frame. That's why you need to be profitable. So I hope this has been helpful for any founders, especially any event tech founders, because having been in the event tech world and having tried to build a few event tech startups myself, it can be a very daunting world to figure out, what does my market actually need? What is the actual problem I'm trying to solve? So, and I've spent a lot of time in my own money, and I've seen founders spend a lot of time in their own money, and sometimes they're, the inheritances and, selling properties to afford developing more features. I want you to avoid falling into those traps that I've fallen into and that other founders have fallen into. So I hope this has been helpful in making your SaaS journey a little bit less treacherous. Question here from Marcelo. Would you consider your cloud costs to be a challenge for startups as well, especially if you use live video? Oh, yeah, 100%. So this is a big one is, considering cloud costs. So when you're building, what I find for most software as a service startups, you're going to be using cloud services a lot, right? So you're going to be using say Azure Web Services or Amazon Web Services or Microsoft Azure or something like that. something that a lot of folks don't take into account is, what is my bandwidth cost going to be? What are my server costs going to be? How do I estimate those on an ongoing basis? And depending on the products that you're using, those can sometimes be hard to figure out. But yeah, I would say, yeah, that's a huge challenge for startups to project well. And this is why you should have, somebody on your team that is well versed in these different cloud platforms, or can at least walk you through the calculators and do some projections, so that you have an idea of, oh, hey, it's going to cost, X amount of dollars per month on average per person. And so you can then take that and go, okay, well, we know that, each customer is going to use, X amount of bandwidth or X amount of server resources. So we're going to set our price at X. So yeah, cloud cost can be a huge challenge for startups. I know it's something that we've run into sometimes, just with having to, say, scale on demand. What I've found is most times, that you're going to have a huge cost in advance. Like it usually doesn't come as a surprise that, oh, we've got this is going to cost, we've got, say, like for us, for our event software, we know that, oh, we're going to need to have up to 500 people on, for the next 4 days. So we're going to turn up our servers for those 4 days. So we can anticipate that, and we can budget for it, and we can project for that in our quotes. But yeah, I think that is something that does get overlooked. It's easy to calculate the person hours. Sometimes it's harder to calculate, say, the server hours. And also knowing, like, how many people, like, how many users can we support before we need to bump up a tier in the services that we're using. So knowing that is going to help you, say, set prices or figure out how to control your costs. It's also I find it's easy to lose track of all the different cloud services that you've got going on. And that results in just letting your costs just get out of control. So I would, on a regular basis, every couple of months, as a SaaS founder, I would be going through all of your bills and asking questions and figuring out, like, where are we spending money? So keep an eye on your budgets, keep an eye on where you're spending your money. If a developer says, hey, let's use this library, or hey, let's use this service, you want to get a projection for that. You want to know, how much is this going to cost, so that we can account for it when we are building, or when we are structuring our pricing model for our clients and our customers. So yeah, great question, Marcelo. So I got a question for you. In Norway, a lot of startups look for government funding, and it seems to me this is more important than getting paying customers. How is this in Canada? Oh, this is I like this one. So getting funding from, say, government sources or getting funding from, say, external sources versus getting paying customers. The thing is that here's my opinion on this. And by the way, this is my opinion. I'm not going to say this is fact. I'm not going to say that this is right or wrong. This is my opinion. My opinion is that whether you're looking for funding from a government source or a private entity, you've got a choice in how you spend your time. You can either look for funding and apply for funding from different sources, or you can go out and find customers. I don't want to say if there's funding available, don't apply for it. By all means, if you qualify for funding, and you can get it, then by all means apply for it and get it. There's nothing wrong with that. What I think can sometimes happen is companies and startup founders get so caught up in trying to get the next grant or the next proposal written or the next, whatever it is, that they lose sight of what it is that they got into business to do in the first place, which is to fill a need in their market, to create a product or a service that they can sell to a market that helps that market get their jobs done easier, better, faster, whatever. So in my opinion, I think, and I've been down this road before. I've sought funding. I've sought grants, loans, that sort of stuff. Those can be great if you've already got an established or a minimum viable product and you need to go to the next step. And in fact, a lot of those, a lot of government programs, they will, if you pull them aside, they'll say to you the same thing. We don't like funding unknown startups. We like funding startups that would be doing something anyway. So in other words, you almost need to be in this position where you don't need them. If you don't need the money, you'll be more likely to get the money. That's been my experience. So again, what I find some founders get into the trap of doing is they will chase funding or they will chase these government programs rather than trying to validate that they've got customers. And sometimes it can, that funding can be a band-aid for the fact that you haven't found good product market fit. Again, it's not to say that you don't have product market fit, but it's a band-aid to say that something's not quite right with the business and we're going to fill that gap with some sort of government funding. So while in Canada, we do have some of those programs available, and I would like to see other programs available for early stage startups. A lot of the programs that we have available are for startups that are already successful, let's say. It's a tricky area because you don't want people to take their eye off the ball. You want to give some incentive to build a product or service that the market needs. But chasing that funding can be a distraction. So I would say that if your primary motive, if you're spending more of your time chasing government grants and government funding than you are trying to get paying customers, I would say you're setting yourself up for some danger. I don't think that's the most productive use of your time. I think you'd be much better off trying to validate your solution with some paying customers. You can use that data, then go for some government funding to maybe accelerate your growth, hire some people. Like, that, we're on a trajectory that we're going to need some people on staff. We're going to be hiring people anyway. This just gives us a little bit of extra wiggle room so that, if that contract falls through or whatever reason, that you can still do your hiring. So I wouldn't rely on seeking government grants and say that that's more important than trying to find paying customers. The number one thing you should be doing, in my opinion, as a SaaS owner, is finding customers who will pay for your service. That is number one. You can use that as that's your ultimate metric of success. You can then use that to get funding to accelerate your goals, whatever they may be. But if your primary source of funding for your business is through government grants and government programs, then I would say that you have not yet achieved product market fit. Might be harsh, but that's my belief. So hope that answers the question. Marcelo says, great advice, especially seeing what's up with Reddit and Twitter these days. Yeah, so Reddit and Twitter are prime examples of, this is another thing to keep in mind, is if you're tying yourself to a specific platform, if that platform makes a move that is incompatible with your business, for example, you've made a Twitter, maybe you made a Twitter app and you're making, say, $12,000, $15,000 a month, and the Twitter API costs $42,000 a month to use now. Well, GG, your Twitter app is done. Like, you're toast. It doesn't make sense to continue. So what we're seeing more and more of as interest rates go up as well is we're starting to absorb the consumers are starting to absorb the true cost of using these different services. Again, for stuff like Uber and Airbnb, they were able to artificially subsidize their products for a long time because interest rates were so low, and we could just borrow more money or raise another round and just cover those costs. Well, with interest rates much higher than they were before, the free money is kind of done. So we're starting to see a bit of a shift, and we're starting to see those costs get passed on. And there's plenty to say about Twitter. I have no inside knowledge. I have my best assumptions. I mean, when that classic whiteboard of how the tweet system worked was released, it was pretty close to my mental model of how I thought the Twitter timeline and how the tweet system was built. But they must have intense bandwidth costs and intense server costs. Serving that many, just having that number of transactions per hour. It's amazing that whenever I think about the sheer size of Twitter, I'm amazed that it works at all, let alone like you can have real-time conversations with people. It's stunning. If you found this helpful, please like, subscribe, share it with your coworkers, share it with your colleagues, share it with somebody who's working on a SaaS. And if you need help figuring out whether or not your event SaaS is ready for market, or if there's some help that you need, send us a message. Check out our links in the description below. Cheers.